Hello, everyone. Back again. Another video, another story. This time, it actually is a campaign diary. This one is. I'm not gonna do much preamble for the campaign diaries. These are mostly functional, for me and my friends. This one is a little different because it is still in the middle of a campaign, so you don't even really need to watch this if you don't want to. This is more for me and my friends to keep track of stuff. But this is a pretty wild story, so whatever you want to do. So, I introduced to you the story of that time I got high-fived by my dad who wasn't my dad, the Genaria Chronicle, Episode 1. I'm calling this Genaria because it's generic fantasy, and we haven't actually given this a name, like we haven't given the world a name. And I don't necessarily want to call it by the Roll20 page name, because if I call it by that, you might be able to find it, which would suck. So, yes, beginning. Before I get started with the funny and the D&D and the ha-has and the ho-hos and the what the shit was that shits, I need to explain a couple of things. This story is in medias res, which means it's in the middle of things, because I had the bright idea of doing this VRCHAT D&D stories thing in the middle of a D&D session that I was already doing. Also, I work night shift at a cheese factory. As a result, I have to go to work between 7:30 and 8 o'clock-ish. My friends can only play around about 6 p.m. This is obviously a problem, because it means I can't play very much D&D at all now most days. So I come, cherish my 2 hours, and I go to work. Well, today was different. Today I had the day off and I was able to play. I had to join in late due to some real-life stuff involving hanging out with my dad, whom I don't often get to hang out with. It was fun. We went to a flea market, and I bought a machete. I joined in around about 8 p.m. When I joined in, my friends were all in the middle of storming a frigging castle that was surrounded by blood rain, killing necromancers. They had just managed to close the front gate at the moment where I joined in. My character was nowhere to be seen. You can have hit on one of the corpse carts the DM suggested, so I guess that was where I was. Let's start by introducing you to all the players. We have Gwen T, current DM, and the Flower Witch, though she seems to eschew the Flower Witching for stabbing folks. Cyril, the necromancer, but the chill kind. The people who are doing the necromancy in the keep are the false acolytes of Cyril's cult. His cult isn't supposed to teach the necromancy to anyone unless they're proper members, and even then he needs to be a master in order to teach people. The player himself is also really secretive about this cult, so even I don't know much about it. This is a common aspect. This is the same player that played Achaeus. He's very in character to the point where even out of character he won't tell you what the hell's going on with his character until it happens. We're here to put the beat down on this false prophet before he can complete whatever ritual they are performing. Gabriel. Spelled in a weird-ass way, Gabriel, not spelled like the angel, but spelled with a Y, is a paladin of the goddess Fina, a custom goddess of the Oath of Redemption. He was given a magic sword created by my character, which serves as a dual-purpose holy symbol and also a cool flaming sword. Elle, an elf from a genuinely savage culture. Elle is a little pocket of bloodlust and battle frenzy. She serves as the party's backline, providing ranged support until she gets into melee range, and then she starts ripping and tearing while taking very little damage to herself thanks to her expensive armor. She will be spending the last half of this story looking for teeth. And me, Helmer Silverbeard. Helmer is a dwarf with a bad... let me try this. With a bad, terrible sort of Welsh accent that I don't do very well. It's better than my friends who can't do one at all, but still. He's a dwarf who's able to make special items in the game system we play. I'll explain what that is later. They're magic items which you spend a point of magic to activate, but you don't need to know how to cast a spell inside of it in order for it to work. It's called a matrix. It also activates immediately after the item is activated, as opposed to normally, where it can sometimes take several turns to cast a spell, like if you're a sorcerer. The game system we're using is called Mithras. It is a D100 system similar to Call of Cthulhu, and it is technically the root system of Call of Cthulhu. Mithras is an incredibly flexible system, and it's capable of running anything, including space, cyberpunk, high fantasy, sword and sorcery, urban fantasy, and a whole lot more. I used to hate it with every fiber of my being, but I've come to understand the pain, embrace the jank, and I realize that this is an incredible system, which has no limit to a DM's creativity. Cults, by the way, aren't the same as Heaven's Gate or Family International. That's the old school meaning of this is the old school meaning of the word, which basically meant brotherhood or fraternity. It's just that this brotherhood or fraternity happens to teach magical spells. Anyway, back to the keep. The party fights against a number of undead as the storm of gore continues to rage. The brickwork of the castle is stained brown and crimson from blood rains past, and the party has the appearance of a metal cover as they fight soaked in red and battling hordes of the undead. Things aren't looking too good for the party as the army of undead outside the keep begin to attempt climbing into the keep, but they manage to close the drawbridge in time and leave the army lining the moat. Cyril uses his necromancy to cast Dominate Undead on the zombies of one of the necromancers, and he turned them over to Cyril's side. This caused the hapless spellcaster to deactivate his spell in a panic. After the necromancer killed his spell, he tried to find somewhere to cower while the fight raged on. A couple of other necromancers, as well as some swordsmen that the false apostles had hired, were in a fight with Gabriel, and it wasn't looking good. There was a spear embedded in his leg and another in his chest. The undead in front of him, ready to rip the spear out of his body, the violent twisting exit rune resulting in his most assured death, but the paladin stood firm. With a yell, he swung his longsword in the direction of the zombie's arm, lopping it off and buying himself just a little extra time. Gwen T, meanwhile, was trying to help keep the rest of the undead off of Gabriel, and while they were a physically weak fighter to begin with, something about the blood rain was causing a numbing and strengthening effect to take hold of everyone in the group, and she was deftly striking out at the undead hordes with her supernatural strength. She swung out at the zombie's head, turning it into a fine mist, which forced the necromancer who controlled it to pivot his point of view to another zombie, making it more difficult to control the now second-person view zombie. It was like trying to shave your hair in a mirror, whilst also seeing another mirror, so you have like this double mirrored effect, where you're trying to use a razor like back here, and you can't see it. You probably know how it is. I don't have to explain it to you. But basically that. In Mithras, zombies' power can be held in either their head or their chest. In this case, the zombies had the power held in the chest. So if you tried to behead the zombie, the only thing you'd do is blind it. It would make it so that the zombie would have a harder time attacking you, but if you wanted to kill it, you had to hit the chest. You had to go for the heart. El was throwing chakram at the various undead in the courtyard below. Chakram are metal discs. Slowly whittling them down as she deftly threw the metal discs in such a way that they would return to her when they finished the grim tasks. She was the one to eventually remove the hands of our future prisoner, her bloodlust insatiable. Still more they fought, growing more and more exhausted, until at the last, Cyril managed to turn the tide. He raised the enemy's dead and turned them against the necromancers. The one that was still alive became a prisoner, surrounded by his resummoned dead, unable to take control back. His hands were cut off and his mouth was gagged to prevent him from casting any spells, and the spears were carefully removed from Gabriel's chest and leg thanks to the careful ministrations of Gwen T and L. This living necromancer begged for some mercy, told them of a side entrance, explained there was a kill box at the front gate which would pepper them with arbalest bolts if they went in, provided information on a side entrance. The party convinced the necromancer to comply with a plan they decided upon. The upstairs section of the keep was too full of servants and fighters to sneak through, so they all decided that their prisoner would be forced to lead them through the rooms where the corpses were being kept, and sorted through into worthy undead candidates. The physical aspects of the undead matter more than the like mental aspects of a zombie. So in Mithras, size and strength is determines how powerful the resulting zombie will be. Because it doesn't like take into account the combat style of the person who died. It takes into account the combat style of the necromancer summoning the undead. So the zombies being puppeted are not actually that powerful. They're not actually that strong. So my character ended up getting tossed aside into the discard pile because he was playing dead. So he's sitting aside, and the rest of the party can kind of see him lying on top of the corpse pile. Anyway, the entire time this was happening, whilst they were walking through, the same numbing strength flowed into all the party members, including me, making them stronger and healthier, but also bringing them closer and closer to undeath. The prisoner was provided with some floppy gloves filled with sand and other solids to make him look vaguely hand-like, so he had these really floppy hands going on. They were then fastened to the admittedly clean, thanks to a spell cast by Gwen, stubs that were once his hands, so they didn't look so suspect. As the prisoner was guiding the conga line of other party members who were pretending to be undead to blend in with Cyril's actual zombies, Elle decided to cause a distraction. She dropped face first into the ground, causing a little shudder from the sheer amount of steel on her body hitting the ground, and she played dead. Nobody suspected a thing. Helmer, me, rose from the pile of rejected corpses and pretended to shuffle over to the line, placing himself among the other foe and real undead, and doing his best to with the best of them. I contemplated asking if the rest of the party was actually undead, so my character knew they were all okay, but when I saw my cell score, I quickly reconsidered. It was so bafflingly low that I would have been easily heard whispering anything. Then, the prisoner made a motion, like he was raising Elle again, and she got up, rejoined the line. We continued moving through the keep, congratulated by some of the keep's members for our prisoner's apparent promotion, and eventually made it down to the basement where a dark ritual was being performed. In the center of a whirlpool of gore, were the undead remains of a dragon. We're talking capital D dragon. This is no Drake. This is no little bitty dragon. This is big fuck off dragon. This one wants you dead. It's big, breathes fire, murder dragon. Big one. In Mithras, a dragon is a death sentence on its own, but this dragon was surrounded by a number of spellcasters who were working to continue the ritual, which made it even more dangerous for all of us. Before we could get to the ritual, whatever magic was undeadifying us took full effect, and all of us counted as undead. This was both good and bad. It meant we were way stronger and way healthier. I had, my combat style was up to 75, and my endurance was up to 101%. But it also meant that we counted as undead and could be dominated by other necromancers. This was really, really bad. Cyril did that first. There was a necromancer right before the ritual room proper that he managed to dominate. As a result, he was able to control that necromancer's undead, of which there were 6. He sent the undead in along with the necromancer to disrupt the ritual. The undead started harassing the dragon, which reacted in kind. A blast of fire hit every undead in the room, and we knocked them prone. We were still in the other room, so all we saw was fire, but we were unaffected. The spellcasters rolled high, so they acted directly after the dragon. One threw some lightning in the direction of the dominated necromancer. The attack missed, this lightning skipping across the stones in a random arc before dissipating. Another 2 sent massive crashes of thunder, one after the other, rolling through the room, which would have knocked normal people flat and rendered them deaf, but we weren't really normal anymore. With our heightened constitution and strength, we had a natural endurance high enough to resist it with almost every roll. The only affected person was Gwen, who was sent flying. We moved in. Gabriel moved up to attack the main boss, an armor-clad necromancer with an onyx rod with gold filigree. He attacked, and it landed, but the armor softened the blow. I moved in as well and targeted a spellcaster on the outer edge of the ritual pool. We noticed that there was a large jar inside the chest of the dragon containing hundreds of thousands of human souls. It was hanging there in its ribcage, and Elle got ready to target it with her chakram because we told her to. Gwen worked on standing back up and getting ready to fight again, while Cyril pulled out a scroll and started reading it. I had no idea what the scroll was. It had apparently come from his cult. Somebody had given it to him before the mission started. A lot started to happen after that. The other casters in the ritual who hadn't acted yet did, and they started flinging lightning some more. They shaved off a few limbs from the undead horde, but it wasn't enough. One of them called upon an air elemental, and it would arrive next round. Bad news. More fighting, more chipping away at health. Then suddenly all hell broke loose as turn 2 began. Some explanation is in order, okay? So, in Mithras, combat is broken up in action points. The higher your dex and int, I think, the more action points you have. My character has really low dex, so he only gets 2 action points. Parrying an attack, action point. Making an attack, action point. Drawing weapon, action point. When you run out of action points, you can make no further actions until next round, which is when everyone has spent all of their action points, at which point all action points are refreshed. So, the way it works is, you've got, let's say you got 3 dudes, 1 with 2 action points, 2 with 3 action points, and 1 with 4 action points. First turn, the guy with 2 action points rolled highest on his initiative, so he goes first. That guy goes first, uses one action point, and then the next guy moves. The next guy is the bad guy. The bad guy attacks the guy with 2 action points. The guy with 2 action points parries. That parry uses up his action point. This results in him no longer having any action points left. Then the bad guy's turn is over. Next guy, he's got 3 action points. He's got 3 action points too. He does his thing. They go through, continue doing that until either the bad guy's dead and the combat's over, or everybody runs out of action points. At which point, everybody's action points are refreshed, and a point is subtracted from their exhaustion, which is determined by basically how hard they can fight. It's determined by their constitution and I think a couple of other stats. I can't quite remember exactly. It's constitution multiplied by something divided by something. A lot of math in this game, but basically, in short, if you have low constitution, you're not able to fight for so long. And if you keep fighting despite being exhausted, then you will end up eventually becoming actually exhausted, and it will cause all of your rolls to become more and more difficult until the point where you can exhaust yourself to the point of going comatose. So, that explanation over. Back to the fight. Turn 2 has just started, and the mages and dragon were up. The dragon moved to Gabriel and tried to bite and swallow him. Succeeded on the bite. The damage was split between me and Gwen T, thanks to a spell that he had active called Sacred Band, which worked on only me and Gwen and him because we were lay members of his cult. Basically, what being a lay member is it's like, let's say you're agnostic, right? You're agnostic. You don't necessarily believe in any particular deity. Maybe there's a creator deity, who knows? And you go to a Buddhist temple. You want to see the Buddhist temple. You want to see the sand, the beautiful sand drawings and the veves and so on. I don't think they're called veves in Buddhism, but whatever they're referred to. You know, those beautiful sand pictures they make on the ground that get blown away every other day. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. You want to see the Zen gardens. You want to see them. You want to see the Shaolin monks training. You want to see all of that. So you go to visit a monastery. You're expected to kneel and you are still expected to kneel and to pray, or at least sit in quiet contemplation when the time comes, because that's polite. You, in this case, would be considered a lay member of Buddhism. You don't necessarily have much faith in it. You don't necessarily believe in it too much. However, you're willing to go through the motions of following the deity in order to get some sort of bonus. In this case, you get to stay in the monastery and continue to see all the beautiful sights of the monastery. In the case of us, me, Gwen, and Gabriel, all of us were able to be affected by Sacred Band, despite the fact that me and Gwen didn't really worship his god. We just sort of gave the statue props, and it allowed us to be lay members of the cult. That's effectively what it is. The damage, as a result, was split between all of us, and Gabriel kept his leg, which would have been bit off by the dragon if he hadn't cast that spell. I should note that the big bad evil guy who was running the ritual used an Enslave Undead spell, which is basically Dominate Undead, but it's better. It's used for whole crowds instead of just a single person, and he enslaved all the zombies under Cyril's control, except for the Necromancer that Cyril had dominated. Cyril had his Undead Necromancer and their spell, which killed all 6 of the zombies that they were controlling, and it killed them immediately. All those zombies immediately dropped dead, and all that was left was the Necromancer, who was eventually going to wake up later and wonder what the fuck was going on. The spellcasters, meanwhile, start acting again, and they're sick of the lightning and the thunder not working to kill these people, so they start casting madness on the 2 weakest of mind, myself and Elle. My character manages to resist enough to remove both arms from one of the spellcasters, but not quite enough. He ended up failing a willpower roll and gained a passion called Madness. The DM said, "It's cold. It's so very, very cold. You need so badly to get warm. It's cold here." At one point, I get tripped, and the DM says, "You realize the blood is warm." The fight continues to rage, and Cyril uses his scroll. The scroll was a spell that allows you to swap bodies with a target. Keep an eye on this, because it becomes a game of shells in a hot second. Cyril uses the spell on the dragon. The dragon inside Cyril's body then runs upstairs. Cyril sends his undead that he had summoned after the dragon that's inside his body. While that was happening, he is now inside the body of a dragon, which gave him far more action points to work with. He broke open his own, the dragon's, rib cage, allowing the jar to fall into the blood churning below. The dragon then swallowed the big bad evil guy. The big bad evil guy also had his own body swap spell. So Cyril was in the body of a dragon. The dragon is in Cyril's body, and now Cyril is in the BBEG's body. Are you paying attention? And the BBEG is in the dragon's body. Several minutes are spent figuring out who has what action points left. The air elemental is summoned and tears the dominated necromancer into pieces, and then shit starts to get really weird. A spellcaster casts Earthquake, which is what knocked my character prone in the blood. I started thinking about the jar and thought if I could convince the DM that if I thought the jar was warm, my character, in his insanity, might want it. Another spellcaster sends Madness L's way, which makes her want to eat rocks. But first, she needs better teeth. Her teeth are too soft. She needs to eat the rocks, but she needs better teeth. So she proceeds to spend the rest of the combat on the hunt for metal teeth. Insanity continues with the body swapping situation as the BBEG possessing the dragon starts trying to go after the jar. Cyril shrinks the dragon to a quarter of his size using another spell, and the BBEG is forced to spit Cyril out. Pay attention. Keep in mind, Cyril's in the body of the big bad evil guy, okay? The big bad evil guy ends his body swap spell, and Cyril goes back into the body of the dragon, and the big bad evil guy goes back into his body. So Cyril is now in the body of a dragon, and Cyril's body still has a dragon in it, and that dragon is nowhere to be found. We don't know where that is right now. After what I do in a minute, he starts heading back upstairs to find his body and starts to have a chat with the dragon inside it. My character is now wrapped around the jar and trying to hold on to it as it floats slightly above the blood. He cherishes its warmth. Gabriel swings his sword at the jar, putting a crack in it. My character, in his insanity, starts screaming, "No! You can't have my warmth, it's mine!" And he punches a hole in the jar with a brawn check and drinks the jar. I am drinking a jar filled with hundreds of thousands of human souls, and I am already getting started making a new character sheet, as I'm certain he's about to explode or something. The dragon fails to consume me despite its attempts at attacking. It misses. It's too small to swallow me. Gabriel tries to stab me in the stomach with an attempt to get the souls out, but it turns out that it was a little more complicated than just being in my stomach, and all the stab happens to do is cause a large blue beam of light to come shooting out of my guts. My character doesn't even feel it. It's like a bee sting. As I realize how warm I am. Purely, wholly warm. This place was so cold, but now I am so very, very warm. But this place is cold. Everyone else is cold. I shouldn't be the only warm one. I roll one of my passions. It's a passion which represents the character's love for strangers and those he doesn't know. Passions are great in Mithras. I fucking love them. You roll a D100 against a passion, and if the D100 roll fails, you may act against that passion, but if it succeeds, you act according to that passion. It's so good. It makes it so that you don't have players that are like, yeah, I have like a flaw or whatever, but I don't know. There's no mechanical issues if I don't like actually use it, and you can use your passions to make your rolls at other skills just better. Like you take the critical range, which is a bunch of math that I'm not going to explain right now, of whatever the passion is, and you apply it to a skill roll in order to make your character better at that skill. It's amazing. I fucking love passions. Anyway, I roll my passion, which is Perfect Strangers, and he remembers all the people that don't have any warmth. He remembers all the people that are cold, all the people who are not warm, and he decides that he wishes to share this warmth with everyone. And so he does. He's teleported hundreds of miles up into the air. We're way above the keep now, and he feels the presence of the god of storms, the lord of change, and in this moment, my father. I'm a demigod now for about a few seconds in this, and it's kind of cool. It's like a convict father placing his hand against plexiglass. I could feel his nearness, but that's okay. Everyone can share in the storm. I can't take that plexiglass thing. That was the Dungeon Master's quote. Anyway, down came a bright blue rain, the red replaced with blue as the souls of my body burst forth into the clouds, turning the blood into a clean, clear rain. The whole land consecrated by the storm. It was in this moment where the madness turned into perfect clarity, and Helmer saw beyond the veil of the world, for he had tasted godhood in that moment, and he chose to share it. That whole fight, all of that, several hours of combat in game time, 15 seconds, maybe. Meanwhile, in the keep, Cyril met up with the dragon inside his body. And after much grunting and growling, the dragon that was Cyril and the Cyril that was dragon came to an understanding. Yes, it's still confusing. They headed back downstairs to deal with the necromancer. The dragon rumbled, "I am Cyril," as it descended the stairs and re-entered the ritual chamber. The dragon also spoke its name. The name was like the world crashing down. When the name was spoken, it shook the soul of those who heard it, even though it came from the mouth of a man. Cyril, as a dragon, negotiated with the BBEG and demanded that he return to Cyril's cult to pay for his crimes. The BBEG proceeded to spit out his tongue, which he had bit the tip off of in rage. He then spun around and pointed his rod at Gabriel, which was supposed to enchant him. Enchant is a forced infatuation, which is akin to enslavement. It's a really, really, really evil spell. Basically makes you love the person to the point where you'll do anything for them. But it didn't work because because Gabriel is really, really high willpower. When it didn't work, he spun towards Cyril, the human, who was currently host to a dragon, the human body, and that had a spell on it that Gabriel had cast earlier before the fight called Absorption. This absorbed all of the power of the rod completely, which caused the rod to crumble to ash. The necromancer's trump card lost. He accepted his fate. He watched the red waters of his ritual pool turn clear as the rain washed the blood from the fields. This whole time, Gabriel has been trying to wrangle Elle, who is now convinced that she needs to gather enough metal to have metal teeth, and then she can eat the rocks. So she is gathering spearheads and almost puts herself into an Iron Maiden that was clearly possessed because it promised her more teeth. The walk of pure triumph from the party was a sight to behold. No one in the keep dared attack the dragon or its rider. The necromancers fled in the presence of such power. While Gabriel's triumph was also a bit spoiled due to the insistence from the savage elf that she steal all the pike heads for more teeth, they all held their heads high, for they were the victors this day. They all headed to our base of operations, which was a dilapidated manor that Gabriel's family used to own. We have been slowly repairing it over our adventures, and it has served as a good base for now. What of Helmer? He managed to drag himself out of the moat, which he fell into when he fell from the sky, an enlightened man. His ancestral hatred of goblins, elves, and the like cast aside, for in that moment of demigodhood he realized none of it mattered. They were all strangers, all brothers in work, friends yet to be had. He had a connection to the storm-touched fields around the keep, and it wasn't hard for him to find the necromancers that went astray, and he led them to Cyril. The dragon, its mind returned to its body, flew off into the sunset. Perhaps it will be seen again, perhaps not. Cyril brought the necromancers and the BBEG in front of his superiors of his cult, and as a result of his stellar work, he was promoted on the spot, given access to far greater magics for his ability. Gabriel informed the Paladin Order of what was going on and what happened. The Paladins, in return, offered to help with the repairs of his family estate, so the place wouldn't look so bad as a base of operations, as this Paladin had just managed to deal with a major problem in a very, very short amount of time. Helmer stayed at the manor for some time, did some work on a set of incredibly high-quality scale mail for one of his friends, and even managed to fit some new metal teeth into Elle's head. The madness was gone, but not before she had removed some of her normal teeth in her eagerness. After the armor was finished, however, he decided to go on his own, to enjoy the sky and the world, and to understand the power that he, and now Cyril, because a god rode on his back, were granted by the god of storms, and to gain the power to exhort him and cast down his lightning. All this lightning and thunder and such had given Helmer an idea, though. A new magic item, one that struck with the power of a lightning bolt and perhaps with a chain attached, to easily return it to hand when needed. A javelin for El. Perhaps this would be his pilgrimage to forge a weapon worthy of the storm. That's the gist of the story, really. After everything was over and the session was done, pretty much everyone other than myself went to bed. When you work night shift, you can spend plenty of time writing scripts, and that's what I was doing. I wrote the script directly after I finished the session. All said and done, it was a really, really good session. The best sessions are the ones where you lose track of time and reality falls away for a little while, as you see in your mind's eye what your character is doing, what your fellow players are doing, and for a while you revel in the chaos. That's it for the campaign diary this week. I'll be back with another whenever I'm able to stick around for more than a couple of hours. In 2 weeks, I'll be playing the campaign I run, and you'll hear the finale of a Weird West campaign that quite literally went off the rails. Well, I better let you go now. Take a brewski for the road and be sure to drive safe now. Keep cool, because the summer's almost over, ya know. Yup, okay, bye-bye. Yup, bye.